some people dogmatically cling to a single definition of atheism, which is quite funny, because atheism can and is defined in different ways, and it can be thought about in a topic, a philosophical topic of atheism or the atheology, the arguments against theism. You can see atheism as a philosophy, and even though I don't particularly see atheism that way, or at least a whole philosophy in itself, I understand that atheistic philosophy or thinking can and does influence our worldviews, and depending on the use of atheism and your upbringing and everything like that, you can end up at varying conclusions, but some of them might be the same. One that you can think of is if you don't believe gods exist, you probably think that prayer is useless and therefore you won't pray. That's just a simple example, right? But some like to go on and claim that there is only one definition of atheism. It's just having no belief in gods, and that you should have a certain worldview by your definition. Well, no, that doesn't really track. I'm saying that there are logical entailments of that. Now, those logical entailments might lead you to different conclusions to me, but there is more thinking. It's, once you become an atheist, part of atheism, and being a rational thinker, as many of us atheists claim to be, is the reasoning. Part of atheism is our reasons for becoming an atheist and our considerations of what it means to be an atheist. All the other things that religion has provided answers for, well, we don't have those answers, so we have to look for those answers elsewhere. And if you are a rational person, if you care about rationality, if you look for reason and answers in things, then you will spend some time reasoning your way through a number of other problems. It can be interesting, though, that once you then provide a list of different definitions, how atheism has evolved throughout the years, that includes references to other places, they can just simply shut it down and ignore it and say, no, they're not atheism, even though the definitions that you're using to answer their question actually both fit into their definition of atheism. So once they then say the proposition gods do not exist, and the atheists accepting it's true, and not believing gods exist and not believing gods don't exist are not atheism, they're contradicting themselves. Because if you believe no gods exist, that entails not believing in gods. And if you are an agnostic, someone that doesn't believe gods exist and doesn't believe gods do not exist, then by their definition of not believing in gods, they are also an atheist. The problem they've got here is they're saying that atheism is only a lack of belief in gods. Well, you can't only lack a belief in something. You either believe something is true, which therefore you don't believe it false. You believe something is false, therefore you don't believe it true. Or you don't believe it true or false. This is often seen as the suspense of judgment position represented by agnosticism, one of the forms of agnosticism, or it could be for a different way like apatheism or ignosticism, or just being an innocent. Someone that hasn't actually considered the proposition yet. You don't believe either way because you don't actually have a position on the topic yet. But all of these types of not believing, for them, could be considered in the subset of not believing. So if atheism is only not believing in gods, then all of them are atheism. But they contradict themselves by saying none of them are atheism, but this is what atheism is. To their response that I still haven't provided them any definitions of atheism that are not lack of belief, even though I have. They've just asserted that two that I provided were not atheism, even though they are. I then provide them a list of resources which provide a number of different definitions of atheism. Everything from the lack of belief definition to the propositional definition. There's even a screenshot of Nathan Alexander's work where he collated all the various encyclopedia and dictionary entries since the 16th century and included them in some of his work, showing a variety of ways that atheism has been defined throughout the centuries. I'm not saying there's only one definition of atheism. I'm not saying you have to use a particular definition of atheism. I'm saying there are different definitions of atheism, and the different definitions will have different entailments. Their response to that is that they're still waiting for me to provide other definitions of atheism. You can see here that this person is starting to look like an incredibly dishonest actor. They are so firm in their conclusion, they're arguing top down. They are so determined that their conclusion there's only one definition of atheism is correct. They have not only contradicted themselves, but they are ignoring the evidence in front of their face. This is the sort of thing that you expect from, say, a creationist who is starting from the conclusion that the world is 6,000 years old and is ignoring all evidence to the contrary. And it embarrasses me when a fellow atheist demonstrates this kind of behavior, but it's more prevalent than many of us atheists realize. So I do address the fact that, I've provided resources and all that they've done is been denialist and cynical. But if they don't believe me, or the resources I provide, then maybe they should take a philosophy course and see what atheism entails. They then assert that I haven't shown that they've misunderstood anything, and they're waiting for evidence of that, and they're waiting for evidence that I've already provided them resources. I mean, all they had to do is scroll up. All they had to do is read the messages. They are outright refusing to address any of the evidence. So in telling them, I said as much. They should scroll up and try reading, because it's all right there in front of them, and they then claim that they've showed that I failed with my claim of different definitions of atheism. There is no failure whatsoever going on there. They've failed to do anything apart from assert their single point of view without any solid reasoning, and they've provided no evidence. They then assert that, again, you have yet to show that atheists must have a certain worldview, which is a bit of a change, because perhaps at this point they've realized, oh shit, there are different definitions of atheism, but they've missed the point. I've never said that atheists must entertain a certain worldview. I've said that there are logical entailments from conclusions, including the conclusion of atheism. For example, if you don't believe in gods, you probably won't believe praying to gods would make any difference, except for maybe as a meditation, as you're just talking to yourself. Therefore, you probably won't pray to gods, expecting them to do anything about your situation, and it would be irrational if you did. I've also provided multiple resources, and within those there are links to many more, including the works of Nathan G. Alexander, who documents the various ways atheism has been defined in dictionaries and encyclopedias since the 16th century. There's entries from Set, from the atheist philosopher Paul Draper, an example of it being defined different ways in dictionaries, and an examination of the etymology, and so on. You haven't refuted them in any way, you just ignored them and stated, they're not atheism. Your assertion had no reasoning or evidence. You've provided no clear argument for that being only one definition of atheism. All you've done is effectively shut your ears, going, la la la, I'm right, you're wrong because I'm not open to new evidence, la 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 la, I'm right because I say so. So no, you've not shown the various definitions to be false. You've not shown anything. You've just disagreed without justification or evidence. What's more, to try and dodge that fact by asserting I've said something that I haven't is a really poor show. I suggest you take a moment to actually read and understand the thread and the links, because you are so far off base. I don't really get why it's such a contentious point that there's multiple definitions of atheism, and I don't see what the issue with acknowledging that there are logical entailments off of conclusions, including the conclusion. Although, if atheism is simply not believing in something, it's not actually a conclusion either. A conclusion would be something is true or something is false. That's a proper conclusion. If you can't conclude, you suspend your judgment. So if atheism is a conclusion, then it's not simply not believing something. But that's irrelevant. I'm not arguing for a particular definition of atheism, even though I do have a preference. All I'm saying is this is a really poor show, and this is going to be the first in a part of series called Absolute Teaspoons. Now, this was actually suggested by a good friend on Twitter, and it was aimed at the Facebook conversations that I'd been having at the time a few months ago, but I hadn't had a chance to record anything. This is the first opportunity this year I've actually had to record, so I figured, let's get this one out whilst I can. Anyway, that's it from me, and that was an absolute teaspoon.